Pillsbury is dedicated to women's initiatives inside the firm. They've been recognized year after year as one of the top firms to work for women. And I think that's actually, you've been recognized by Working Women magazine. So they are regularly rewarded and awarded and recognized for what they do for women. And I think that's really telling today in the world of law, because it's really hard to be a woman working in the law. So companies that recognize and make it accommodations for women to understand their career and find a career path that works is really important. So thank you, Pillsbury Winthrop Shaw Pittman. So we are here today with Angela Fox, and Angela is the CEO and president of Crystal City Bid. And what was really interesting, you know, when everybody said, you really need to talk to Angela, she said, I said, what is a bid? What is she bidding on? I mean, yeah, what is that? I mean, so, well, let's start there. What is a bid?
Okay, so we often say Crystal City Bid, we're not auctioning it off, it is actually a business improvement district. A business improvement district is an organization, a public-private partnership, typically between a local municipality and then property owners in an area that feel like they need an additional organization layer of service where a city typically can't keep up or wouldn't offer the kind of services that would make an area attractive to business. Everyone's probably familiar with the downtown bid. A long time ago in DC, before the Verizon Center, before the Shakespeare Theater, it was not a very safe place. It wasn't a very palatable place. A lot of people didn't want to go there. The businesses got together, formed the downtown bid, started clean and safe programs, and really started to transform the downtown area. So a bid will typically solve a business problem in a very specific boundary.
So I was really intrigued by this concept because I really wasn't familiar. It's kind of like you just kind of hear it out there. So where did this idea come from? Do you know where the first idea or how this was launched to set up a bid for a business community or a community?
Well, actually, Toronto will claim the first bid. So a lot of these types of focus on cities really comes out of Canada and mainly the Toronto area.
Interesting. So how many bids now do you think we have in our country?
Oh, I would probably, if I were going to guess, because this would be a pure guess, I would say between 150 to 250 at least. I could be like way off, so that, you know, don't quote me too much on that. But there, in this area alone, there are 15.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, so 15. Mm-hmm. So you've got so we've got Washington D.C.
So you've got downtown bid, you have Mount Vernon Triangle bid, you have the Capitol Riverfront, Noma, Crystal City, Roslyn, Ballston, Georgetown, Capitol Hill.
So in our audience, we always have incredible entrepreneurs and business leaders. So should they be calling on your door? Should they knock on your door? I mean, why would anybody, what is the role that a business community has with the bid?
So in Crystal City specifically, you know, I mentioned that the downtown bid was formed as a means of clean and safe to really start an area and like help that. Our bid, we're a second generation bid, was really about marketing and transforming an area, so really changing the perception. So my world every day is about helping people see, perceive, and experience Crystal City in a different way. So I do events like a 5K every Friday in April. We turned a former conference space into a temporary home for arena stage, now a permanent home for Cinetic Theater. I turned a parking lot into a street hockey league on Thursday nights. You know, you name it, I'm transforming that type of. But then I also deal with, you know, sort of reimagining the Crystal City Underground into what we now call the Art Underground. We have artist studios, we have art galleries, we have a rehearsal space for Cinetic Theater, and then the new tech shop, which opens at the end of March, which is a makerspace. So in that way, you know, we're always talking to entrepreneurs about things they might want to do in our various spaces. So that's kind of a good crossover.
So you get to really be creative and
Absolutely.
really look at this.
Absolutely.
So do people love what you're doing in Crystal City? I mean, how does the business community, they love these new innovative ideas that you bring
yeah,
to the stage?
So my key stakeholders, other than the county level, are all the property owners. So these are big real estate companies, and you know, they think in terms of filling their space. You know, how do I get another commercial tenant in here? And we get to think outside of it in terms of how do you reimagine what this area is. And if you're one property owner, it's very hard to do that because you're typically inside a box. Now, Crystal City is a little different because Vornado owns a huge percentage of it. So actually that gets us to another layer of creativity. But yes, so we're thinking about not just the box itself of the building that we're trying to fill, we're thinking about all of the community around that, how the community interacts, how people interface with the street, with each other, you know, how we can really turn something that was, when I first moved here in 1991, Crystal City was considered a concrete canyon. So in our view, we take that concrete, we've turned it into canvas and mounted local artists' work all over so you're now walking through this living, breathing place of color and vibrancy.
You know, it's really interesting when we started talking, and we always do a pre-interview with anybody we're interviewing. We had a great lunch, and I brought a friend of mine who was my next door neighbor in high school in Japan. And she was in town. I said, come with me and just listen. I just wanted to impress her. That was really good pre-interview. No, we just talked and talked. But we had this incredible lunch, and we talked about, so she owns now a farm in West Virginia on 160 acres. And Crystal City is on how many acres?
About 230.
So she has, so I just keep thinking about this analogy. So on her farm of 160 acres is 6 people. Right. And I think a donkey and some chickens and a horse. That's on 160. How many people come to Crystal City on the 230 acres every day?
So our max occupancy is about 30,000 office workers, 16,000 residents, and 5,000 hotel rooms. So pretty significant.
That's amazing. So 6 people on 160 acres and 30,000 on 230 acres.
Density.
That's crowded.
Right. So we have Metro, we have VRE, both stations, we have bike access. We're the only neighborhood in the world that has an airport you can walk to, and I actually see pilots do it when I bike in the morning. You know, so great transit, and so when you have those kinds of assets, you can increase density. And that's really where people are close together, and so that's kind of a good way to deal with sort of urban issues. And way out in West Virginia, it's not the same. So
oh, it's very, very different, but it was just fascinating when you think about space and people and joining together. Crystal City has always been this phenomenal, and I say that in the sense unique, a different kind of community. Do you even know how they came up with the name Crystal City?
I do. Charles Smith family, basically Bob Smith, bought a piece of land and went and told his dad, hey, I got this great deal, and his dad said, I hope you can get your money back. And Bob started building an apartment building, and he built an apartment building, and in that apartment building, and that was the first one, so they'd build an apartment building, and then they would build a government building, a GSA building, and it was sort of that layer of, built, the government needs another one, they build another building, so they keep the housing. But in the first building, they had a chandelier, and it was a big crystal chandelier, so crystal houses, and so that's where it started.
Oh, interesting. There's always an interesting backstory if you ask
I love hearing
question.
people's stories, because half the time it's like, oh, well, the pilots fly in. There used to be this like glass factory, so it's all shiny, and I'm like,
yeah, that's good. That's a good story. That is good.
We could go with that, but it's not true.
So how does the community, who pays the bid? I mean, who pays you your salary or your organization or the funding you have to operate every year? Where does that money come from?
So the property owners, basically, a boundary was drawn, and everyone inside that on commercial property, including apartments but not condos, they pay an additional assessment, 4.3 cents per $100. That is collected by the county, and then the county, twice a year we get the disbursement. So it's the property owners that are paying, but it goes through a public entity, so it's considered a tax, which means public money, but I'm actually paid by the entity, which is the bid, which is a 501c6 nonprofit.
Isn't that interesting how the money is collected? Because it was really interesting to me, like, where do you get your money? I mean, it's kind of, because you have to have funding, I mean, to make that happen.
Right.
So how do you come up with the ideas then for what you're going to do each year?
So we have a basic framework. I've been doing this job for 7 years, which is pretty amazing. And when I first started, there was a business plan associated with it, and it had sort of 8 key goals. And so we built programs around that. And so every year we have a work plan that sort of goes back to those key goals. And I've said we have everyone wants to live, work, play, and stay in an area that is active, artful, accessible, and green. And so our programs are active, artful, accessible, and green. And we load things in, and each year we figure out how to do a program like this. We just had Crystal Couture, which is our big fashion event, non-stop runway, great trunk show. I got this dress there for $29, so I mean, it's a phenomenal, fun happening, right? So, but every year after we do that event or any event, we say, what about this brand? Can we use this? Can we add other events into it? What are other ways and things that we can do with it? So that each year is kind of a building. And then, we spend at least once a year, we go to another city as a team, and we talk to bids there. We talk to organizations. We look at what's going on. We're getting ready to go to South by Southwest, and sort of get ideas. One of my team members was he's a cyclist, and he was looking at something on a website in Germany, and they have a bicycle race in a parking garage. And we're always about promoting the assets of Crystal City. We have tons of parking, so 3 years ago we launched the Diamond Derby, which is a bicycle race in a parking garage. 1,000 people, well-insured event, doing all these amazing turns and trips, through the garage, fun to watch a kids race. And so this year that event was so successful, we've actually partnered now with Phoenix Bikes, which is an amazing nonprofit in Arlington. They help out youth risks. They teach them bicycle skills, how to fix a bike, how to sell a bike, work in a bike shop. So now that event is being run by them, which gives us more ability to do other events, and then all the proceeds will go to them.
Well, you're so creative, so I'm just going to assume that you have art degree. Is that what your background is?
So I'm an electrical engineer from Georgia Tech. So not exactly, though I do believe engineering is actually very creative problem solving. But I think there's a motto at Georgia Tech, which is we don't make the mold, we break it. And I think that's a lot of what we do, and what sort of I was certainly trained to do, whether it was from I was this tall in my family, or just working with our team on a regular basis. But we have a very creative, open process. There are 4 of us that have been my guys. So Rob's been with me, who's my COO, for 7 years. Charles has been with me. He's my CFO for 6 years, and Joe runs all of our artistic programs. He's been with me for 5. So we have a very, we're always creating and riffing on each other's ideas. I come out of the tech industry, and one of the things in a very large company, Bell Atlantic Verizon, which I'm sure you've heard of. I always loved, we do these great strategies, but then, it'd sit on a shelf, and so what we do is we come up with strategies, but we also make them happen.
I think that's really amazing, because how many times do we as leaders and companies come up with great ideas? I mean, I live my life marinating in ideas. I just love that space. How do you move that? Because sometimes, and I know you probably have a million good ideas that are probably maybe still sitting on the shelf.
Absolutely.
So how do you move that? How do you identify what needs to move up the pipeline, to jump off, that gets off the shelf and on a table? How do you make that process happen? What happens there?
Well, some of it is opportunity. Like when you have capacity, or when you're looking for something, or maybe somebody comes to you and says, okay, I have this building, we're taking it out of service, eventually we're going to tear it down, and I'm like, can I use that? And so it comes up, and then we put Artomatic in it, which then suddenly brings 75,000 people into Crystal City over the course of 6 weeks. So half of it is, I do have an idea, I don't have a place for it yet, or we don't have the capacity to deal with it, so it sits there, and then it's a constant sort of maneuvering. We had an event that we were going to do on March 21st or 22nd, and then we realized that Tech Shop is launching that day, and that's a really big deal for us. So then we move that event, we do this one, and then, so it's kind of a.
So you're always moving things around.
Always moving things
so
around.
How do you bring together your team? Because I love talking about ideas, because I think as we're looking at our world today in business, innovation and creative thinking has got to become a core competency we have to develop.
Right.
So tell me the process. So you come in there, do you meet regularly, or say, because I don't think creativity always just is born, like it's not an organized process. So how do you guys kind of work to make that happen?
Well, and one of the really amazing things about our team, we've been together for a long time, and so it's very much an environment where this is, no ideas, stupid, everything is a possibility, throw it out there, let's figure it out, we're working on it together. Nobody says, this was my idea. I mean, it's nothing like that. It's all very trust-oriented, very open, very communicative. So we do a couple things. Every Monday, usually, if we're Monday-ish, because my schedule is just like everything else. But we sit down as a team and we run through sort of, our work plan and sort of like each project and what's going on, and then that's where ideas, we can talk about them there. So that's sort of a sit down that happens. It's a team, we call it Team Crystal, once a week. And then we're close proximity, so we're always, ideas come and go, and so we're talking as we go through the day. But then we also make time, as I said, at least once a year. Like we went down to Art Basel this year as a team and sort of explored, and also spent time, laughing, talking, and again, incubating plans. And so it's just about being together and also being in an environment where ideas are welcome.
So it looks like you pull from a lot of resources. From availability, a building becomes open, it's going to be torn down. You're going to use it before it's torn down.
Like, can I use that parking lot?
Yeah, I've never thought about doing that. Can I use your parking lot? But that's really interesting. And then you go to other areas. So do people run bids? Do you guys have an association or anything like to get together?
So there are organizations. There are business associations that meet anyone that's sort of focused on a downtown district. There is the International Downtown Association. So there are some resources in that way. For us, we find more value in just going to a place and like interacting with others. And we see, we have various events that we've now seen show up in other cities, and we're totally great with that. Copy relentlessly, do it, because we think what we have created in Crystal City in terms of that sense of community is exactly what we are all looking for in wherever we live. So we love the fact that gets replicated.
So what do you love best about your job and what you do?
I love my team.
Your team.
I do. And I mean, there's just a lot of accountability and a lot of flexibility, and just, you know, I have a great board. I have great property owners. They're fun to work with. And they, you know, we've been doing this for so long. There's a great relationship where if I say, hey, Mitchell, who's Mitchell Shear, can I use that building? You know, or now he comes to me and says, what can you do with my building? You know, and that's, you know, it takes a lot to sort of build that, but they know that we're going to do it. We're going to do it well. We're going to get great press, and that people are going to think differently about Crystal City because of it, and then we're also going to turn it back to them in a state that they can do, you know, continue doing what they want to do.
What's the hardest part about what you do?
So, you know, right now is a very tough market in general. I mean, we've all seen it with sequestration, with BRAC, base realignment and closure. I mean, the bid was formed in response to BRAC, which basically meant of the 30,000 jobs in Crystal City, 17,000 of them were moving. That would kill just about any small city. So basically the property owners got together and said we have an image issue. You know, Crystal City's got phenomenal location, access, transportation. I always say, so I'm an electrical engineer. I have to go this. Electrical engineer, you know, I was the girl at Georgia Tech, pretty much in my field. I mean, there was not, you know, there weren't a lot of other ones around there, you know, and it's like, and it was, you know, when I first got there, I think the ratio was like 7 to 1, and then, you know, by the time I'm in my classes, it's probably 40 to 1, you know, where the odds are good, but the goods are odd, right? And Crystal City.
The odds are good, but the goods are odd. I like that.
Not kidding. And Crystal City was similar. You know, you had great structure, but it didn't really work together in the way that it should. You know, so we've been trying to fix that, and that's where some of the image issues came from. So it's a tough market, and then, you know, I go to the county because I have, you know, big ideas, you know, that we want to implement, and a lot of things they don't know, we don't fit into a box. So helping them find ways. So I was with the director of planning last week, and I said, okay, this is what we need to do in terms of retaining some huge customers. I have PBS in Crystal City. I have CEA, Consumer Electronics Association, talking about innovation. I have Bloomberg. I have Boeing. I have great companies. And I know some fun ways that we can use those assets, make them feel really good about being in Crystal City and Arlington, and also be a great attractor for other businesses. You don't know how to do this, which is fine, because I'm supposed to be the gray. I get to operate in between. Here's how we can create an overlay district. Help me get there. So I mean, they want to be there. They want to do this. They get afraid, like, well, what if this little, you know? And so trying to help deal with that, that's a challenge.
You know, I think it takes a really unique personality to do what you do. One, because I think you probably hear no, or we can't, or it's not doable, or that doesn't fit us, and you have to find your way, and you bring this incredible enthusiasm about what you do. But you've got to convince people to come and sit on your side table. How do you do that?
So I always say at Bell, I basically learned to turn elephants in closets. That's my specialty. And so you know, here I am, like right out of college. You know, just moved up here, and you know, I've got this massive project that I need to do, and I'm sitting at a table. You know, I'm probably 23 with, you know, all men that are like in their from 40s to 60s. They've been there forever. They're like, you know, who's this person, you know, but try, you know, and the first thing you hear anytime you want to do something different, like, and one of my favorite projects ever at Bell was I got to launch Bell Atlantic Internet, which is now Verizon.net. And so the first thing you hear in something like this is, oh my God, we can't, right? And so one of the things that I've learned to do, and I'm not exactly sure, probably part at school and part through this whole Bell process, was like how to say, okay, I understand what we can't do. Help me figure out what we can do. And I shed things along the way. Okay, so I can't do that. I can't do that. But what about this? You know, help me. Like, here's where we need to be. How do we engage in where we're headed and why we're getting there? So help making sure everyone feels engaged in what the whole process is and where we're trying to go. And then, okay, so shedding all of the stuff we know we can't do. Let's find the path together to get there. And that's, you know, that's been if there's a secret sauce, I think that's what it is.
Really? So how do you manage frustration? You know, because there's always seems like there's always that kind of pit bull in the room who's going to say no. I just kind of don't hear them, but other people probably have to work through that. You know?
Well, I mean, I think there's a certain level of, you know, when you engage, like if somebody's actually trying to be destructive, when you engage and when you don't, how you do that. Mm-hmm. You know,
just kind of you have to learn to manage. And I think that's experience. It's just experience because I don't think there's one flat answer for any of these kind of things, the challenges we hit.
So I will tell one funny story because I remember this table. So I mean, I'm like 22, I had one really belligerent individual, and he happened to call, and he was like, look, gal, and I, me and my little, get my shoulder up, my hair up, and I said, listen, I am not, nor will I ever be your gal. I'm 22, right? And so we went through this, and then after that, he was great. Never had another issue with him. So
interesting. And I know.
And I think it was just that matter of standing up to this is not about that. This is about a project, and you're not going to treat me like I'm a gal. I'm the person that's tasked to do this, and we can do this together, or we can,
do it. Really interesting. Good for you. Good for you. I think that's a lot of times it's just.
That's my dad.
Yeah. So I really want to talk about your folks, because I'm assuming since you do so much creative, and now I know you're an electrical engineer, so your parents were artists.
So my dad's a PhD in nuclear engineering.
Okay, okay. Your mom's an artist.
Well, but he was the CEO of Teledyne when he retired. So he was a masterful leader in that way. So he even though he had all the background technology wise, he was actually a very vibrant sort of individual. My mom is a PhD in psychology.
Okay, so but really, if you think about it, that really does a tribute to who you are. Your father is a nuclear physicist, so that tells you this analytical reasoning you've got. And then your mother is a master in psychology, is a psychologist, so she's got so it really gave you this really well-blended.
Very bizarre set of dysfunctional traits.
Yeah, well, but you've mastered them very well and really used them, which is really interesting. So when you were growing up, how did you kind of see what you think you wanted to do? How did you end up picking electrical engineering?
So so I was always good in math. That would be I won math team, what a geek, right? But I always loved math. And there's an interesting phenomenon around young girls who stop getting interested in math and science around 12, 13. They start dumbing themselves down. In my family, that wouldn't have happened or been okay in any way. And I think a lot of that gets down to girls' relationships with their fathers, is what some of the research says. I spend a lot of time actually with young girls, trying to convince them to stay in the math and science field. So there was some element of that, a lot of support in that, and I certainly could write, because of the mom side, if you will. But I was interested, and I love solving puzzles. I'm an avid crossworder. I love doing that, always trying to solve puzzles. So my dad, when I was in junior high, got really sick with Addison's disease and almost died, and an endocrinologist saved his life, Elaine Bunick. I was going down a biomedical path in order to become an endocrinologist eventually, because of that, sort of in honor of Dad. Along the way, though, I was going to engineering school also to figure out what in the world my father did every day. I still have no idea. But then I realized when I was in school, the biomedical path, basically I would start working when I was 40, which seemed a little bit long, so I kind of sidestepped into fiber optics, which was telecommunications, and that's how that kind of shifted.
I think that's really interesting. Let's talk a little bit about STEM, and if people are familiar with STEM, it's science, technology, engineering, and math. We're really trying to get girls to become an age. So you kind of stepped off in this new pathway. What can we do? What do you think we should be doing today about engaging girls? Because really, it's really cool work. It's really cool to play in the sciences and to be a nerd. It is really fun. Right. And how do we get girls to change that culture so that they realize so many great things lie before, whether or not you choose this? And if you're a girl listening or a parent, you tell your children to hang in there with science. It is fun. It is cool. It is nerdy and geeky, and it is very cool to be nerdy and geeky. Just remember, people will work for you when you're nerdy and geeky, and that's something. But it's really fun. I think that's what, and it's cool to be the girl in the room like that. And I remember many times, because I come from a tech sector, being the only girl in the room, and I never felt uncomfortable with it. And I didn't feel that we weren't heard or that we were disrespected.
I think there's less external pressure now for girls not to be in the math and science arena. It's just more of it is internal, and I certainly, any chance you have just to showcase, this is, here's what I do. I went to my son's third grade class, for career day, and it was really funny because initially Tatton was like, Mommy, you don't need to do this. What you do is boring. I'm like, boring? What are you talking? Thanks, pep talk. And so I go in there and I have a picture and I say, what do engineers do? And I said, create. And then I have a picture of what a bridge looked like before we put art under it. and then a picture of what it looks like. Here's, and then, you know, we design, and I would have, you know, various pictures, you know, and just kind of giving people a little bit of a different image about what engineers do. Now, he did tell me afterwards that what I did clearly wasn't boring, so, but, you know. But I do think, as women, I feel a responsibility as a woman to talk to young girls about, you know, this is what engineering looks like, you know, and people say, well, how did you become a person at a bid? And I'm like, well, I didn't plan that out. You know, I didn't plan that out, but I have the basis because studying engineering, going to a school like that, you know, to do pretty much whatever. And I remember my first job at Bell Atlantic, my boss said, you know, at this you're at the telephone company, there are a lot of different jobs. There's not a single job here you cannot do.
Wow.
You know, and I believe that. I say that to young girls. There's not a single person here that could not be an electrical engineer. And I will say, there were plenty of times when I thought, you know, what we call imaginary engineering, industrial engineering, or other things looked more interesting. You know, I mean, you know, I'm in a lab, and they're, you know, they're doing interfaces and things like that for human interaction, and I'm like, you know, but I could do it, and I wasn't going to get out of it. And in the end, you know, I'm thrilled that that's sort of the path that I took.
So, how did you end up getting this position? You know, running a bid. I mean, you're working at Bell Atlantic. You're doing the engineering side of the house, where your skills and everything are called on. How did this happen?
So just real quick on the path. So you know, at Bell I had 5 different jobs, promoted 5 times in the whole 9 years that I was there, which really wasn't that long. And I loved being there. You know, people talk about don't stay here too long, you get a bell-shaped head, you know, the history, you know. But I loved it, and I felt like, you know, I was in their executive development program. I had a phenomenal mentor who I still am in touch with today. Loved him. And you know, but I got a call. Somebody who had left Bell said, you need to talk to this person. And I went to Starbucks in Oakton, actually, met him, and suddenly these 9 various jobs I'd had at Bell Atlantic made sense. It's like the puzzle just, you know, and so I mean, I had never had a thought at the time about, you know, leaving Bell Atlantic, and I literally made the call after that to my ex-husband, and I said, I'm leaving Bell. I mean, it was like that easy. And so I went to the small internet company. I was employee number 11, and they had, like, you know, all these things they said they were going to do, and I get there and they hadn't, you know, it was like an idea on a page. I'm like, so I get to actually bring this idea and make it happen, which was fantastic. And then that company was bought, and I started my own little strategy firm. So I was over in Japan and Kuala Lumpur doing CEO-based strategy for technology and things like that, which was really, really fun. And at the time I was pregnant. You know, so my son traveled, you know, internationally in utero.
You don't have such a you've been there.
Yeah, exactly. You know, you've been to Thailand. You know, you've ridden an elephant in Chiang Mai. You know, so. Through that, so in all of this, you know, and when I was launching Bell Atlantic Internet, you know, the hours are the hours that, you know, we all know, the insanity. I was living in Arlington. I was working in Reston, so I was on the road, you know, in the traffic, and I survived a lot of that by going to theater, which is sort of the, you know, my mom at an early age, you know, took us to theater. You know, I remember seeing Forrest Tucker and Showboat, and, you know, all these, like, you know, and so I loved going to the theater. And I watched TV one time. I'm not a TV person, and the stress. You know, I just felt more stressed after I sat down than when I got up. And when I would go to a theater, like live theaters, say Woolly Mammoth, like these little teeny theaters, I would leave. You know, I'd have this crazy get there, you know, and then you're there and you sit there on the stage, and then, you know, an hour and a half later, you're like, what was I worried about? You know, and so I found, I mean, to me, it was very personal, the transformation of the arts. So I started giving money to theaters, you know, because I always need money, and then I ended up on the board. I ended up on the board of Woolly Mammoth. That was my first arts board, and then 6 months later, they asked me to chair, which kind of shocked me. I'm like, I've just joined this thing, you know, but it was, you know, we're building a new theater. So I ended up being chair while we raised $9 million and built the theater at 7th and D. You know, so in all of these job things, I was getting more and more involved in the arts at a level of not performing, but certainly supporting that effort. You know, so when I was chair of Woolly, we did a tour for the Shakespeare board, and one of those board members was Kingdon Gould, who owns PMI parking and real estate all over the place. And so, in between in these machinations, I was recruited to come run an organization called Cultural Tourism. And then from Cultural Tourism, because I'd met Kingdon on this tour, he recruited me. He says, Angie, we're forming a bid in Crystal City. I know you're not interested in that. And I said, actually, that's where I live. That's an area I know. There's so many great things about it, the possibilities. I am interested in that. So it was sort of an arts, you know, obviously a lot of problem solving, a lot of things along the way, but the connection to the arts really helped in terms of, you know, this great mix for what's worked for Crystal City.
So, and it seems like art has become this huge part of what you do in Crystal. What drove that initiative? Because I'm intrigued by art. I think it's really important. I think it's really important, and I can't even articulate why I think it's so important, but I think art is critical for a community. What draws you to that? What made you step over there, whether it's theater, I mean all forms of art, whether it's singing or it's dancing or it's painting or whatever?
Well, I mean, I think it was Kennedy who said, all of the stuff that we do, we will be remembered by our art. I mean, that's where, that's the stuff that sort of makes us who we are in the history and what prevails. And so if you take a community like Crystal City and you're looking at, you've got plenty of office workers, you've got restaurants, you've got, fitness capacity, you've got all of this, but you don't have a component that is, and you're trying to give it a soul, you don't have the component that is that. And to me, that's where art comes in. So whether it's the art of wine or art on the walls or theater or a movie night, something that, is another outlet, because as people, I think that is what makes us, that's what rounds us out. And for me, I felt very personally, I could see the impact of how I felt as an individual when I would go to theater, but then I also saw how other people interact with it and sort of what the role of that is in a community to make it a full community. And the economic development piece of it. So, we love art. Like our first big event in Crystal City was the first time we did Artomatic. Artomatic had never been out of the district. They'd never partnered with a bid before. Now they've been out of the district, and they will never do Artomatic again without partnering with a bid, right? But that first time, that first experience, we brought 32,000 people into Crystal City over 6 weeks. Haleo had their busiest week ever that day that the Artomatic opened. So that was
describe Artomatic. Tell us what Artomatic is, because I think we've heard of it, but we don't really understand what it is.
So Artomatic is a nonprofit, all-volunteer organization that basically every couple of years takes some property that's vacant and brings in all of their artists. Basically, if you're an artist, if you think you're an artist, if you want to be an artist, if you want to display somewhere, this is a place for you. You get a space, and then that is your little gallery for that period while Artomatic is open. For us, I said, we brought 32,000 people, more tattoos and piercings than had ever seen the light of day in Crystal City. But it was awesome because they loved it, the great restaurant options, and it was just a wonderful compliment. And it also, gave the property owners like this effect on retailers that, there's a real economic impact of having this in your community.
It's a symbiotic relationship.
Absolutely.
So when's the next Artomatic?
So I guess they were with us 2 years ago, so I'm not exactly sure what their current plans are, though we always welcome them back. So, but usually we're on a 5-year cycle with them. But we've done other things like, turning the space into the temporary home for Arena Stage, which brought 250,000 people into Crystal City over the 2.5 years they were there. And by the way, Kathleen Turner in Mother of Courage, phenomenal. It's just, I just saw the opening last week, so I still actually go to the theater. They're not as much anymore, but it's phenomenal.
So what big thing would you like to see happen in Crystal City?
Oh, so I have a bunch of very big things actually that are coming, but I can't officially talk about them right now.
You can tell us. Go ahead.
Right,
it's okay. It's okay. We'll keep it right here.
The camera's
right?
not, it's all just
ignore the
us,
camera.
right?
Just ignore the camera.
So, but I have been doing this for 7 years, and I absolutely love it. And I also feel like we're not finished yet, and we've got some really big things that I'm extremely excited about that are right here at this level. And so, every day is different for us, and I'm pretty psyched when we get ready to launch some of this stuff here in the near future.
So you've got announcements coming soon.
We do.
How do people follow you or find out what's going on?
Well, crystalcity.org, obviously that's our website. You can find me at Fox Oliver in terms of tweeting.
And we've got everything there.
There. So yeah, so we use a lot of social media, a lot of press. Scott Circle has been a phenomenal partner for us in helping get the word out about what we do. But there's typically a good bit of buzz about that.
So what's the next big thing coming down the road we should know about?
So we just had Crystal Couture. On March 1st, we're doing our next wine and beer walk. If you haven't done these yet, these are absolutely a blast. So people have the whole Crystal City underground, the tunnels, the mole people, all these kinds of things. And I have this philosophy of marketing: lean into it; it doesn't hurt as much. And so on the art underground, so we took the underground, hey, art underground, that's a subculture, that's good, so that's how we focused that. And then we said, we've got available a little retail spaces in there. Let's do this beer and wine walk. It's a 1K. You know, people put their race bibs on.
A wine K or 1K? Is it a wine K or
It is a 1K.
Wine K. Okay, 1K, wine K. I like it.
And so basically there are several stops along the way, and you sort of sip and stumble your way through the underground. So that's March 1st. It's really fun. It's really low key. All of our events are meant to be low hassle. So everybody has so many opportunities with your time. And if you're going to come to Crystal City, we want you to be able to find it. We want you to be able to park or take metro. We want you to have a really good time. You know, you're not spending all your time in lines and frustrated, and and so that's really what we aim to do. And that's what the 1Ks are about too.
So how do you manage all the stress in a busy schedule? What do you do with your personal time?
So I'm a pretty active yogi. I said the other day, I have this phenomenal yoga instructor. It's a level 2-3 Jiva, and I'm focused on my handstand. You know, and suddenly I'm doing these like round over things. I'm like, you know, at 45, I really wasn't expecting to be learning gymnastics. But I love yoga. I absolutely love yoga. In fact, at least once a year I'll go away by myself. Last May I was in Marrakesh doing yoga by myself. So I'm working on a trip like that. And I run. You know, we have our 5K, so I run as well. So a lot of fitness aspects to it. I go to the range. Range is a good stress reliever.
The range, like to shoot things?
Yeah, so I'm a Southern girl. I'm a grit. You know, I'm a girl raised in the South. You know, I'm not Southern living. I'm garden and gun. Yeah. You know, this is my dad again. Yeah. You know, so you know, my nickname's Bullet, and I give it. So just a fun way to sort of, to relieve tension. And then I'm spending time. We have between the two of us, we have 3 10-year-olds.
Ah, okay. 3 10-years-olds. That's a party.
It is a party.
Yeah.
It is a party.
3 10-year-olds. That's
yeah.
One's a phenomenal experience. Put 3 together.
Right.
It's always like elementary school. You know, who's doing what to who.
Exactly. Never a dull moment. So, and a dog.
And a dog. Yeah, you always need to have a dog. Right. If you have 10-year-olds, you have to have a dog in there.
Exactly.
Well, let's open it up to the audience and see who has questions for you. Who'd like to ask a question? Oh my gosh. Okay. We'll start over here with Marjorie.
Beautiful.
Oh,
beautiful.
I love that quote from Winston Churchill. We don't support the arts. What are we fighting for? That's wonderful. Beautiful. Thank you. Great question. So what is the demographics? We want to make sure we get this on camera. How do you describe the demographics and the vibe of Crystal City now?
So I think vibe is it's a pretty high energy, growing younger crowd, more families. Now I think one of the things that sort of compelled me into this realm is that, if you live in this area, you can spend your life on the road. You can have a nice house way out in your commute, back and forth. Basically, you're there with your kids maybe, an hour and a half before bedtime when it's like the most stressful time of the day. So we, our message is, you can have a situation where you've got complete access to all the things that are great about this area, great green spaces, phenomenal parks, lots of events, great grocery, everything you need, in urban lifestyle. And so we're big proponents of that, and actually spending time together with people, which I think is what it's all about. So we're having more and more families, lots of dogs. A lot of single divorced men in their 40s apparently is a big, big demographic
okay.
for us.
Any single ladies? Now you know.
There was a report about
Get
this.
Get a dog, move to Crystal City. Okay,
exactly.
All right, walk the dog, go meet a single guy. Okay.
Exactly. So, but the young, smart, creative set, that are technically astute.
Excellent.
And leaning wealthy as well.
The great question, great answer. Yes. So is Crystal City considered part of Arlington? Is it Crystal City is considered just Crystal City? I mean, how does that
It's part of
work?
Arlington.
It's part of
Arlington County is the second smallest county in the United States, so and most populated.
Really? So Arlington County is the second smallest county in the United States and the most populated.
For its size.
For its size. Who's the smallest?
Sorry, I don't know.
Let us know.
I should know that, shouldn't I?
Yeah.
Wiki. Who's got Wiki?
Yeah, I know. Really good question.
Right.
Okay. What county?
Urban
County. Urban County. Okay.
So before our events and things, because obviously the message is, we want people that live and work there to enjoy and partake, and then we also want people to come there. So if we do a 5K on Friday, like every Friday in April, like we do, we'll get about a third resident, a third worker, and a third people coming from all over.
It's a great happy hour.
It is a great happy hour. Well, I mean, if you're going to do a fitness activity on a weekend, do it on Friday, 6:30 p.m., get it over with. I mean, you can, you get to sleep in on Saturday morning.
I like the way you're thinking. Oh, great question. Great question. So what is Tysons Corner? And everybody, if you're watching this, no matter where you're in the world, I'm sure you've heard of Tysons Corner,
right,
which is a city, I would say, and that is similar in sense. It's an urban city inside Tysons. What should they learn?
Well, when Crystal City was first built, I mean, it was car was king. I mean, the underground tunnels, the overpasses, I mean, the 6 lanes north at 70 miles per hour right down the middle of Crystal City. I mean, it was all about the car, which is, you know, so much of Northern Virginia is still all about the car when you think about it. And in Fairfax and Tysons, I mean, you've got so much land that the approach wasn't on building that density. So finding ways, either, you know, we've done things with art and fencing and parks to sort of change emotional barriers, because a lot of what Tysons is emotional barrier. Like, I'm not going to get out and walk across the street. I'm going to get in my car. I'm going to drive, you know, to go from Tysons to the Galleria, right? Because it's just not. And so trying to remove some of those emotional barriers and shrink the space that is car-oriented is a big piece of it. You know, but also finding the areas where that's less of an issue and programming those first, you know, and kind of starting with a small heart and, you know, really making that a core zone.
Does Tysons have a bid?
They do not. They have an association. Yes, right. Right. Well, so there's a Fairfax Economic Development Group. They do have a McLean. There was a McLean Association, and then they were forming a Tysons Association. I'm not sure exactly, you know, how active they are or what they've been doing.
So if somebody's in a community watching this right now and they think that's what we need a bid, how would you even start that?
Well, so typically bids require a certain amount of density in office, because that's where the funds come from. You know, and you have property owners that are looking to solve an issue. I mean, that's where it starts. If you're like at Clarendon, they have a partnership, not a bid, because as much as it's a dense area, it's more residential and they're smaller businesses, and they have a hard time, you know, pulling together the boundary to actually make a bid. Boston's got density, downtown's got density, so that's a big piece of it. But certainly, you know, getting the stakeholders around the table to identify what the problem is that they're trying to solve is a good start. Really
interesting. And one thing I want to ask you, you had mentioned that your funding comes from taxation that's imposed on the businesses. Is it also imposed on the residential?
On the apartments?
On the apartments?
Not on condos.
Not on
Other
condos.
bids have different philosophies about that, but.
Okay.
And just one thing too on the Tysons piece. So in Crystal City, you know, I have a certain architecture, and with that architecture, there are things that to me fit. Like, I can look at something and I see it, oh, wait a minute, this is, somebody else will view it this way, but I know what we could do in this space. So if I have Tysons, I'm not trying to figure out how to do what Crystal City's doing, I'm trying to figure out what will fit in my area. You know, you couldn't do a 5K every Friday in the downtown bid at 6:30 p.m. Can you imagine? Right? Yeah. Right? I can do that in Crystal City. So if I have an area, I'm looking at that and saying, what can I do differently about this to make people think differently about it, to make people more engaged in the process that fits in the area that I have and won't put too much stress on the community either.
So that's a great question. So first, what is the greatest lesson success you've had as an individual? So I don't think it means, you know, don't say the thing that you mark off the list, but that personal accomplishment.
I mean, there's so many. I mean, I think a big thing with the bid itself, you know, I have property owners that are a key stakeholder. I have the county that's a key stakeholder. A lot of times property owners in the county are absolutely at odds in terms of what their goals are or how they operate. And I have figured out, like, how, you know, if the county's saying, this is my money, it's tax, and the property owners say, no, this is my money, I pay that tax. I've figured out ways to stay out of that argument. Like, that is not an argument I need to engage in. You know, that I don't need to, you know, chicken or egg, I'm not going to solve that. Here's what we're trying to do, right? So I think that has been, and figuring out how to, you know, work through that has been a huge success. I would say, on the other side, oh goodness, who you have on your team is, you know, when I first started, I often say I made one of the best hires and one of the worst hires on the same day, because I was operating at such a speed. That happens, by the way. I talked to somebody else that said, you're not the only one that's done this before. So, but you know, I'm now, like, when I interview people, like when we're bringing on somebody new, it is all about not just their capacity, because there's certain things, you know, you can train and others, you know, and it is how is the fit for the team? You know, how will this interact? Because, you know, we have something so unique, but it's also been, you know, really, you know, putting together a group of people that can work really closely together and still enjoy hanging out together and doing things together. And, you know, now Joe's engaged and Rob just had another baby. You know, I mean, we're, you know, it's like that's kind of the, you know, the environment, you know. So I think always, you know, putting a careful eye to the culture of your team would be my.
I could not agree more. I think team building is one of the most important things you can do, and you can bring that one person who doesn't fit and
it
will
doesn't
be
mean they're not a capable person. It's just the
fit.
personality was.
Yeah. And it seems to be that's one of the biggest angst, I think, for many leaders is that, you know, to deal with that. What was the question? How many people
on the bid? Yeah, okay. 4 including me. And so we, you know, we partner really well. Like we use a lot of groups, like, you know, fresh farm markets. You know, so we wanted to do a farmers market in Crystal City, and we'd been going after a fresh farm. I mean, they're the thing, right? You know, they do the Mount Vernon market, they do the DuPont market, they do the Penquarter market. They're fabulous at what they do. Their initial expansion, even though we were like trying to get in there and talk to them and convince them why they should be in Crystal City, they were like, oh, we're going to go to Annapolis, we're going to Baltimore. And I'm like, oh, you know, okay. So, you know, Rob and I are talking. Rob's like, you know, trying to figure out what we're going to do about having a farmer's market. And Rob's like, you know, I don't think, you know, we may not be able to have a farmer's market. And I said, Rob, if you and I have to go to Whole Foods, buy everything, get a truck, put on overalls, and show up, we're going to have a farmer's market. And so, you know, that motivated, I guess. We found another partner, and we did a farmer's market, and she was fantastic. She'd done some other farmer's markets. She was fantastic. We gathered all of the data, you know, that we needed, and then the next year we shared it with Fresh Farms, and they now do our farmer's market. And we just signed another deal with them. And Ann Yonkers, who's the founder of Fresh Farms, was in my office, and she said, I wish it was as easy to work with all of our other partners as it is to work with you guys.
Wow, that is a statement. So that, and I like your strategy. You said, okay, we want this. If we have to go to Whole Foods and buy the food for a farmer's market, which I would, if I was working for you, I would be, we'll find a workaround, because I don't like going to the grocery store for my own food, much less for other people. Exactly. So I think that was brilliant. And then you used that, but it wasn't like, okay, this is where we're going to stop. You said, okay, now I'm going to take this, I'm going to use this as my test to make a provability.
I will show you why you need to be in Crystal.
Brilliant, yeah. Brilliant. Yeah. I love that strategy. See, so sometimes it's always good to think, what's my workaround? And you always have to be thinking today, what's my workaround? What's my workaround? How do I make this work? Great question, thank you.
But we partner, and we want our partners in the end to feel like that about us, you know. So.
What are the roles in your team? Because you've got a small team and you accomplish a lot. So what are the roles in each of the
So sometimes it's every port in a storm, but most of the time I'm a lot of external PR, you know, strategy. Rob is, you know, the key execution guy. Joe's our curator and events piece, and then Rob is the administration that ties us all together.
That's awesome. So the question was, she's fascinated by the unexpected that that you've had, but what's been your most fascinating transformation that you've had from moving in these unexpected places?
So when I first started, we had an old conference center in the Marriott, the Crystal City Marriott, and I had been there for a billing fundamentals class when I was in new product development at Bell Atlantic. So I knew the space, the Crystal Forum, right? And you know, people were looking for different ways to sort of reposition Crystal City. And I'm dear friends with Molly Smith, who is the artistic director. She hosted my baby shower for me. And I went to Molly and I said, so over coffee, I'm like, you know, you still looking for a temporary solution while you build your new theater? And she said, oh my God, yes, we have, you know, nothing is coming together. And I said, well, I have an idea. And so, you know, in the meantime, I talked to Mitchell and I said, if I could convince Arena Stage to use this as their temporary home, could I have access, because they own that Marriott, could I use that theater for Arena? And Mitchell's like, you think they'll come? You know, and then, you know, 6 weeks later, we were announcing that Arena Stage was coming to Crystal City. I mean, it was an old movie theater before it was a conference center, so it was acoustically perfect, right? So you had that going for you. You had great parking, great access, and Arena needed a solution. And so in 100 days, for less than $1 million, we built a temporary home for them. And so to me, that was just the start. And it, you know, and I tend to, in whatever I'm doing, you know, whatever the role is, I look at, you know, so if my goal is to change the way people see, perceive, and experience Crystal City, I need something that is just almost shock value, right? And Arena Stage for most people was shock value. And we did it, and it was phenomenal. And now that's a permanent home for Cinetic Theater, which is also a phenomenal organization. Great, you know, fun, creative theater. But that, you know, that level of getting people's attention to say, yeah, no, Crystal City's going to be different, you know, and then Artomatic, and then the next one, and then the next one. And so that now today, people buzz about Crystal City in very different ways than they used to. They're doing outstanding. So their first year in Crystal City, they also were still performing at the Kennedy Center and at the Landsberg. So first year they had 16,000 people come through. This year they had 40,000 people come through. So they're doing a phenomenal job. Their 12th night they just had, which closes this weekend, If you like Lindy Hopper's swing, it's amazing. Hamlet, Silent Shakespeare is next. You know, they're absolutely growing. So it's, you know, they just had a new rehearsal space. They do summer camps for kids. Their office space is there now, so they're doing really, really well.
This has been awesome. I can't thank you enough for joining us today. We've learned a lot, a lot of that I didn't know, and it's really exciting to have this understanding because you have combined business and strategy and creativity and innovation and all of the things that come to give back to a community and a region. And I think that's really a great accomplishment, and I applaud you for what you've done. And it has to be attributed to your leadership and your insight. You're really incredible. And really thank you for letting us have a chance to get to know you. It's been wonderful.
It's really fun. I'm honored. Every day I get up and I'm honored to be able to do what I do. So I feel very fortunate.
Thank you for joining us. This has been wonderful. So